The second song, uh, Shiva, I'd written the riff when I was working at a guitar store, a record store in Chicago, down on Belmont and Broadway, near what became the Pumpkins rehearsal space. I wrote it on my Ovation acoustic, and I just sat there all day playing, na, 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 and I wrote this song. And for me, from my personal vantage point, that's really when the Smashing Pumpkins really started on the road where I wanted us to go. A more original sound, a sound that felt less derivative. Um, it's very hard, as anybody knows, to do that in rock. It took me years to even find a language that I understood and felt personal to me. And Shiva, in my mind, is like the first true Smashing Pumpkins rock song. I certainly debated at the time when we put the record out whether to make it the first or the second song, but I Am One still felt like the more powerful opener, which of course in hindsight proves my point, which is if it was going to be the opening track, you think we would have spent a little bit more time to come up with a couple new wrinkles, which is why the I Am One 7-inch single on Limited Potential and the release on Gish are almost identical. Um, what else can I share about Shiva? Probably what also I think what defines it for me is it's probably one of the first songs that sort of has a personal manifesto to it, where it becomes personal. The lyrics are personal to me. Shiva being the inhaler and destroyer of worlds from Indian lore. I love the thing. Uh, there's different ways of spelling it. I spelled it, I guess, the way whatever book I had, Siva. Most people, use Shiva, which why to this point people still call this song Siva, which might be the correct pronunciation, but being from Chicago, we said Shiva. Um, um, I think the song is really emblematic and one of the songs on the record that really captures the band's live dynamic style at the time. For comparison, if anybody knows, check out the Peel session version of Shiva, recorded probably about a year later, which is the song evolved from the Gish version. Um, but we didn't actually, when we went in to record Shiva, we didn't have a set arrangement. We used to jam. All the parts were longer, shorter, depending on cues and glances out of the side of the eye. So that was the first time we ever had to make hard decisions. And I think Butch was helpful in that, in trying to get us to make it a little bit more of a pop song, a little bit more concise. But you also hear the band's early dynamic style, the shifts in tempo, the mood. Um, uh, there's a cool little thing in there. Our first use of the Big Muff actually on record. There's that sort of little liquidy solo that I play um, during the chorus. We used to call it, or what we knew they call it, the Clapton crying woman, or crying woman something. You turn all the treble off the pickup and get this kind of woo, and that's the first time we ever used the Big Muff on the record. Little do we know that the Big Muff was going to be such an instrumental part of our next record, also with Butch. Um, what else can I tell you about Shiva? Oh, this reminds me. As long as I'm sort of wandering around in my own brain here, depending on how this goes and depending on the reception, I may do something in a couple days where I'll do a live Q&A. So if people want to ask follow-up questions about things I missed or maybe things I glossed over, I'd be willing to entertain that. But we'll see how this goes first. Um, let's see where I am. 2 out of 10, right? 11. Um, I think Shiva's a good example of what over time has become a really contentious and much debated issue about the Smashing Pumpkins, about who played what and why and where and how that evolved. Like I said, I'm really not here to delve into the drama, but I think it does, in order to explain the process of recording, that level of tightness and attack. I think it needs to be explained a little bit how we got there. When we recorded all our demos in 1989 or so, the songs that became I Am One and the early versions of some of those songs, what is commonly called the Ignafo tapes. Most of the band wasn't around when I was doing the recording. They were either busy or didn't want to come, or they didn't want to sit there for 5 hours while I poured over whatever. So it became this kind of thing that I would do the demos on my own. Nobody seemed to care or be uptight. Obviously, it's Jimmy playing the drums. When we went in to record La Dolly Vita and Tristessa with Butch, that was the first time that James and Darcy in particular were meeting Butch, and Butch did not have a favorable opinion at that time of their ability to play for a record. And given the time structure, like how somebody will look at their watch, it kind of fell on me like, well, we don't have a lot of time, and if this is going to take time, and it kind of like, it wasn't like a decision, it was just like he kind of looked at me like, well, who played on these demos that I got? And well, that was me, kind of thing. Well, why can't you do it? And everybody kind of looks around. Okay, not a big deal because that's the way we've done it. So when we went in to do Gish, the understanding was, well, this is a real album. We're going to have more time and stuff like that. Well, again, in the process, in the pressure of the moment, under the circumstances, it was Butch who pushed for me to play all the parts. Now, I would be lying if I said I minded incredibly, not so much that I wanted all the work, because I didn't, but to the extent that I wanted our record to be as good as possible. And Jimmy and I had an opinion at the time, which maybe wasn't the most fair, which was, we spent a lot of time practicing the basement. It's not our fault if you guys didn't. Now, that's a little bit of a bourgeois way to look at it, but we were also young men and, full of ambition. We also didn't have the benefit of Pro Tools. Those days, it was literally tape or cut the tape. So when it came to things like guitar parts and vocals, and I'll get into vocals in a minute, we didn't have the luxury of moving stuff around like you do now, where people have the chance to play with more feel, and then if they don't, if there's one chord or one moment off, it fix it. So it was just kind of thrown back on me during the recording process, although we had gone in with the understanding that it wasn't going to be that, and I was under the impression that it was going to be somebody else's problem to sort out. So again, it's back on me. Now, to give you a little bit more context, and Shiva's a good example, and if you go back and listen to this recording, you'll hear it. This is the first time in my life where I've got somebody breathing down my neck. When we did Tristessa, 4 or 5 takes, I could play pretty well. Okay, good enough, move on. Now, with some luxury and some time, now I got this guy I barely know, Butch, going, that's not good enough. What do you mean it's not good enough? Oh, it's out of tune here. And it's like, in what became, this super obsessive need, and I'm not saying it begrudgingly, I'm saying it from the standpoint of, I'm used to just kind of playing a couple takes, good enough, sing a couple takes, good enough. Now I got somebody whose job it is to make a super professional record for a bigger independent label, kind of telling me, no, you don't understand, it's not good enough. Well, what does that mean? Do it again, do it again, do it again, do it again. So now I'm doing like 20, 30, 40 takes, like I've never played this much in my life. And he's starting to explain to me, see how this is better and this, okay. So I kind of get that general understanding. Now when we get into the vocals, sing a line. Oh, that's out of tune. What's out of tune? I never even, I just sang. I didn't even know what in tune was. I mean, I could hear an out of tune guitar. So not only was there the pressure of making this debut record, which of course is trying to make a name for himself. We're trying to make a name for ourselves. We realize that if we don't do a really good job on this record, we're all going to go back to working our day jobs. But the bar that we had been under Tristessa and La Dolly Vita before, or even our demo sessions, imagine now it's 3, 4, 5 times the pressure, and the accuracy rate and the necessity, which is why that record is so beautifully in time and in tune, because Butch insisted on me playing at that level. Of course, Jimmy plays very well, but he wasn't playing to a click on any of those songs. So he's all over the place because I want him to play super dynamically. So Shiva's a perfect example of the Pumpkins live style brought into the studio, Jimmy unleashed, properly arranged for the context of a sort of pop song, and then it falls back on me to create this well-oiled machine, which, by the way, doesn't exist. Nobody can play like that, probably not even me. But under the microscope, under the pressure, thank God I had the concentration and the ability to do it. So Shiva's a prime example of where, for the first time, the precision of what became the band's precision rears its crazy, ugly head, meets the pressure of the moment, which of course plays out further down the road on Siamese Dream. And so all these things are meeting together. And then in the middle of course, you have the typical band politic where people want to play their instruments and play their parts, and there's a lot of pressure there, and that's well documented. And like I said, I'm not here to talk about that, but at least bears some understanding for how we got to the position of me playing that, and why by and large, the sound that people recognize as what they call the Smashing Pumpkin sound is my ability to play with Jimmy and Jimmy's ability to play with me and play at that other level. That's not to say other people didn't make contributions. And in fact, a lot of times the way I would play, I would try to interpret the feel that I got from when the band played live. So it's not like there was a live version of the band and there was a studio version of the band. In my mind, the studio version of the band was me trying to emulate the live version of the band at its utmost to create maximum density and power, because certainly I thought we were a very good live band. And also that also was a strange thing to try to understand, again, as a young person, 23 years old at the time, try to understand why somebody who was mature in Butch, who'd been there, who'd made major label records, was trying to explain to me what that level of proficiency was like, a level I'd never played at in my life. And suddenly I'm sort of in this position where I've got to sort of sink, I got to swim faster than I can sink. I got to play to things that are not perfectly chopped or timed or whatever. There's no click. Jimmy's playing like a madman, and there's no Pro Tools, and it's, away we go. The good news is we were able to do it, and we created what became the first idealized version of the band, which is why if you compare, say, something like I Am One, the limited potential version versus, say, I Am One on Gish, you'll hear the real difference of Butch's influence in that particular way, even though it still, quote unquote, sounds like us. Okay, I think I've said enough about that.